Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We may be getting toward the end of the summer box office season, but that doesn't mean that the movies are cooling down at all. As a matter of fact, we have a big late summer hit, one that was kind of a sleeper on a lot of people's radar going into the summer. But really blew up this past weekend, so we're going to talk about that. Before we do, though, this is a show about numbers. I just want to say, much to my surprise, the video that I did about War of the Worlds about a week ago has now become the most watched video here on this channel. I certainly did not see that coming. I'm glad people enjoyed the video. It just goes to show, of all of the Marvel movies, the big films, the breaking news that I've covered, it is the little rinky-dink, poorly executed remake of War of the Worlds that I wasn't even sure anybody would care about that ends up being the most watched video ever on the channel. And actually, 3 of my 10 most watched videos have been in the past year. So thank you to everybody that has been tuning in and everybody that watched me talk about a terrible, terrible movie. Luckily, the movie that tops the box office this past weekend was much better than War of the Worlds. It was the film Weapons, which had one of those weekends where every time the estimates came in, they were higher and higher, and the actuals came in higher than the estimated number from yesterday, or from Sunday, I should say, $43.5 million. And we're going to break down that number and where it stands, especially among original films this year. The movie that many people thought might be number one as recently as a couple of weeks ago, Freakier Friday, had kind of the opposite happen to it this past weekend. The numbers kept going down. It debuted to a respectable $28.5 million, but it really was not a contest between what was going to be number one and what was going to be number two. In third place was The Fantastic Four: First Steps, which took another pretty steep drop, 59.2%, for a $15.7 million weekend, and we have a lot to talk about with the numbers for that movie. The Bad Guys 2 took a kind of surprising 51.8% drop in weekend number 2. I guess a lot of the family audience was going to see Freakier Friday. That was a top 10 movie for me. I predicted it to be one of the top 10 in the summer. I don't think that's going to happen. It brought in $10.5 million. It's at $43.6 million so far. The Naked Gun dropped 50.6% to bring in another $8.3 million. It's now at $32.9 million. Dropping out of the top 5, but still holding well, was Superman. It dropped 42%. For a $7.9 million weekend. It's now at $331 million domestically, and it actually passed the number 7 film, Jurassic World Rebirth, which is also hanging in there pretty well. It dropped 44.7% in its 6th weekend, bringing in $4.8 million. It's at $326 million domestically, although internationally and worldwide it has far surpassed or is far ahead of Superman. F1 the movie, speaking of staying power, still in the top 10 in its 7th weekend. It dropped 30.2% to bring in another $2.9 million, and a big box office milestone for Brad Pitt is actually now in the rearview mirror. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Together had, again, what you would call a horror movie drop, 62.5% in its 2nd weekend for a $2.5 million weekend. It's now at $17.1 million domestic, and the Angel Studios release Sketch rounds out the top 10 at $2.4 million. It opened ahead of the weekend, so it's brought in $4.9 million so far domestically. Dropping out of the top 10, we have How to Train Your Dragon after 8 weeks, so it stays tied with a bunch of other movies for the 2nd longest run in the top 10 so far this year. I Know What You Did Last Summer and Smurfs are both out of the top 10 after 3 weeks. And looking at the biggest theater count changes, Smurfs lost the vast majority of its theaters, 1,482. It's out of wide release. It's in 813 theaters. I Know What You Did Last Summer lost over half of its theaters. It lost 1,198, though it is still in over 1,000 theaters. How to Train Your Dragon lost the majority of its theaters. It lost 859. It's out of wide release. It's now in 600 theaters. F1 the movie lost 673 theaters. It's still in 1,351, and there will be a re-release, I believe, later this month, where they are putting it back into some of the premium format theaters. So the box office story is not written altogether on F1 the movie. And Superman lost its first big chunk of theaters. It lost 617, but it's still in 2,920. This is the probably poorly named Road to Recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is the average for 2021 to 2024, and that dotted black line is every weekend this year. And we kind of went right in the middle between the average of where we have been and the average of where we were. If Freakier Friday had opened bigger, if some of the other movies had held better, then maybe we could have gotten closer to the pre-pandemic average, but we're just not there yet. I feel like I say this every week. There is a chance maybe this upcoming weekend with Nobody 2 hitting theaters and with Weapons still being in theaters that we could maybe get close to the average of where we were before 2020. But at this point, I'm just going to ride it out and see. I'm done making predictions because this has certainly been a summer where we saw a lot of successful movies, and we have seen a lot of successful movies. But as far as the overall summer, I really don't think it's been as spectacular as many people were expecting, especially given the high-profile films that were coming out. I'm changing the order up a little bit just to cover all of this weekend's box office stuff at once. So these were the per-theater averages for this past weekend. Boys Go to Jupiter was number one as far as per-theater average. It played in just one theater and brought in $14,355. Boys Go to Jupiter is an animated film about a young boy in New York trying to make money for the holidays, and it is from director Julian Glander. In second place, we have Weapons, which brought in $13,586 per theater in each of its over 3,200 theaters. Then we have Freakier Friday, which brought in close to $7,200 per theater. The Lovers on the Bridge is in fourth place, a 4K restoration of the film, which was released in the 90s. It played in just one theater and brought in $6,186. And then the Fantastic Four First Steps rounds out the top five, still bringing in $4,385 per theater in each of its 3,600 theaters. Looking at the top films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, at number one is a film from India. It's called Mahavatar Narsimha, and I'm sorry, as always, if I butchered that. It is an animated film, and it is the first in a planned crossover universe about the avatars of Vishnu. In second place is Chowmiraput 4, which is a bit of a holdover. It brought in $517,000 in limited release. The number one film, by the way, brought in $647,000 in 230 theaters. In third place is Kristen Scott Thomas's debut film as a director, My Mother's Wedding, which brought in $433,000 in 402 theaters. Then we have the documentary It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley, which played in 125 theaters and brought in $420,000. And finally, we have Strange Harvest, which played in 772 theaters. It is a sort of fake true crime documentary about a fictional serial killer. It brought in $223,000 total. Let's turn now from the domestic marketplace to the top five films internationally. This is all markets outside of the US and Canada. At number one, dropping about 50% from last weekend, is the Chinese film Dead to Rights, which brought in $41.5 million. Another Chinese film is in second place, Nobody, which brought in $35 million. Nobody is an animated film about a pig who goes on an adventure and befriends other animals along the way. In third place, we have Weapons, which brought in $27.5 million in international markets. But right behind it is Dongji Rescue, which brought in just over $27 million. Dongji Rescue is a historical drama about a group of Chinese fishermen who rescued British POWs in World War II and then protected them from Japanese soldiers. If you're wondering, by the way, why there are so many movies coming out right now from China that are about their conflict with Japan, I think it's probably because we're approaching the 80th anniversary of VJ Day, which was the end of World War II. And, there's a lot of complicated history between those two countries. So we have two major Chinese films now directly addressing the conflict between Japan and China. And finally, rounding out the top five, we have the Fantastic Four First Steps, which took a 55.8% drop from last weekend internationally, so not really doing much better than it is here domestically. It brought in another $17.5 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get our top five films worldwide, and Weapons is actually the number one movie in the world with a debut weekend of over $71 million, which is a great number considering that it is a very modestly budgeted film. Freakier Friday, also somewhat modestly budgeted. It opens to $44 million worldwide. Dead to Rights drops 50% because it's only playing in China with a $41.5 million weekend. It's now at over $300 million, though, worldwide. Nobody comes in fourth place at $35 million. Its total thus far is at $76.9 worldwide. Again, that money coming from the Chinese box office. And the Fantastic Four First Steps drops a cumulative 57.9% worldwide from last weekend, for a $33.2 million weekend. Its worldwide total is now at $435 million. So let's talk about Weapons, which is the number one movie of this past weekend. And I think, unless the bottom really falls out, it looks bound to be one of the top 10 movies of the summer. It was a great opening for Warner Brothers. It was a great opening for the horror genre, and it was a great opening for original movies. So let's talk about all of those individually. First of all, these are the top horror openings so far this year in 2025. Final Destination Bloodlines is at number one at $51.6 million, followed by Sinners at number two and Weapons at number three. Something notable is that Warner Brothers is the studio behind all three of those movies. 28 years later comes in fourth place with a $30 million opening, and then we have The Monkey, which opened all the way back in the winter at $14 million. This was also one of the best openings of the year for an original film, which I define as a movie that is not a sequel or directly based on a previous film, published work, brand, or real people/events. I actually added brand because by my other definition, technically F1, the movie, would count as an original film, but it's still trading off of the brand name of F1. And what I really want to reflect on these charts is a movie that is actually selling you on an original idea. So the top five openers for original films so far this year are Sinners at number one with $48 million, Weapons, which is less than $5 million behind at $43.5 million. Then we have Elio from Pixar, which was not a financial success, but opened to $20.8 million. One of Them Days from back in January, I think, is at number four at $11.8 million. And then another film from back in the winter, Flight Risk, at $11.5 million. So you can see, of these five films, really the only big openings were Sinners and Weapons, and they are still far behind the openings for the non-original franchise, sequel, etc. films that we've seen thus far this year. Weapons is also one of the best original movie openings of the decade. It is at number three, just behind Nope, which opened to $44.3 million. Sinners is the best opening weekend for an original movie this decade at $48 million. Onward is at number four, which opened right before the pandemic shut down theaters at $39.1 million. And then we have If from last summer at $33.7 million. So Weapons is notable for having a good opening for an original film, but it also had almost unprecedented reception as far as the audience goes. We talk a lot on this show about CinemaScore, which is a randomly sampled survey of people from around the country where they give movies a grade of A+ to F. And Weapons was one of the very few horror films that have scored somewhere in the A range, so from A+ to A-, since CinemaScore started releasing these numbers publicly back in 1986. We talked about this earlier this year, but Sinners is the only quote-unquote pure horror film to get an A CinemaScore. No horror movie's ever gotten an A+. If you count Aliens as a horror film, then it would also qualify. That's a bit of a hybrid. So then we have the A- range. And again, this is largely subjective. I count only 8 movies since 1986 that have gotten an A-. Weapons this past weekend, A Quiet Place Part 2, Five Nights at Freddy's, which really had its box office legs undercut because it was a day-and-date streaming release, Get Out, The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2, The Sixth Sense, and The Lost Boys. If you want to quibble about whether or not some of those are horror movies or not horror movies, other movies that might qualify based on your definition that got an A- score are Dracula Untold, surprisingly, Underworld Awakening, Zombieland, The Mummy Returns, Red Dragon, The Silence of the Lambs, Blade, and Misery. And the fact that Weapons is in this very rarefied air of getting an A- CinemaScore says to me that it could be set up for a pretty good box office run going into the rest of the month of August, especially because it doesn't really have a lot of competition in the R-rated horror type genre. I mean, we've got the next Conjuring movie coming out, but that's not until early September. So it could very well have a lot of runway here to rack up those grosses. We'll see if that word of mouth and the usually good box office hold we see with an A- CinemaScore, we'll see how that compares to the often front-loaded nature of a horror film. But I think that Weapons could very well be the surprise story of the summer so far. I know a lot of people had kind of pegged it as a possibility, but the fact that it did as well as it did certainly surprised me. But I'm happy to see that, especially for an original film. And Weapons also continues a real hot streak for Warner Brothers, which is even more notable because they started the year on a cold streak. These are the Warner Brothers domestic openings so far this year. Right out of the gate, they had Companion, which was a financial disappointment. It opened to $9.3 million. Mickey 17 opened pretty soon thereafter. Another financial disappointment, $19 million. Then we had The Alto Nights, which just nobody went to see that movie. It opened to $3.1 million. Reportedly, that was a passion project of David Zaslav. And if you'll remember, going into Minecraft and going into Sinners, there was some real talk about Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdy, the head of the feature department at Warner Brothers, being in trouble because of the underperforming nature of their theatrical slate so far. But ever since then, Warner Brothers has been on fire. They've put up 6 consecutive opening weekends of $40 million or more, starting with the Minecraft movie, which is the highest opening weekend of the year at $162.7 million. Then Sinners opened to $48 million. Final Destination Bloodlines opened to $51.6 million. F1, the movie, which Warner Brothers was handling distribution for, opened to $57 million. Superman opened to $125 million. And then Weapons this past weekend opened to $43.5 million. And I saw a factoid that was floating around saying that this is the first time that a movie studio has had 6 consecutive openings at $40 million or more. And I did a little bit of research into that. The main thing that stuck out to me was I thought, well, wait a minute. Back in 2019, Disney had a real run. I could have sworn that they would have had 6 movies opening at $40+ million. And they would have had they not acquired Fox, because they were in a great rhythm with Captain Marvel and with Avengers Endgame and with The Lion King. I mean, that summer of 2019 was pretty legendary for Disney. But right in the middle of that run, they had Dark Phoenix, which opened to below $40 million. It was released under the Fox name, but it was technically a Disney film. So if you're including that as a streak breaker, then yes, it does appear that Warner Brothers is the first movie studio that's been able to do that. If you, for some reason, discount Fox from the Disney releases of 2019, they also had a pretty legendary run. I think it might have even gone up to 7 because you had Toy Story 4 in there, you had Aladdin in there. But yes, speaking technically, Warner Brothers has put together a really impressive streak, and they've got a chance to extend it. We'll see what happens with this latest Conjuring film. Let's move on to some other films. First of all, this is the franchise tracker for the 4 Fantastic Four movies. This is adjusted for inflation, and the Fantastic Four First Steps has passed Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer to become the second highest grossing Fantastic Four film when you adjust for inflation. It's about $31 million behind the original Fantastic Four movie, or at least the first one released theatrically back in 2005. And just a quick note on adjusting for inflation. We spent some time with it last week. I talked about this on my live show. I get that that is a conversation that's ongoing, and it's something I've talked about here a lot before. But the fact of the matter is, this is how I'm going to do it on the show. If you don't like adjusting for inflation, or if you don't like those numbers, that's fine. There's a lot of people that don't do it, but I do it because I think it provides some historical context. So it's going to be part of the show. If you don't like it, sorry. So I've refreshed some of my graphics, I've changed the programs around, and this is the new MCU franchise tracker domestically. And the way that this design works, it's easier for me to edit, and I can also include the entire MCU again, which is nice. So this is all 37 Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and you can see that right now the Fantastic Four First Steps is the 24th highest grossing MCU film. It is just ahead of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It's just behind Doctor Strange. And once it gets past Captain America the Winter Soldier, which is at $259.7 million, I think it's going to be really hard for it to pass that $300 million mark the way that it's been dropping. So it could very well end up in that number 22 range, which would put it in the lower half of the MCU. The yellow squares, by the way, are releases post-2020, sort of in this pandemic sliced era of the MCU. The green box, of course, is Fantastic Four First Steps. This is the MCU when you adjust for inflation. And you can see that the Fantastic Four First Steps is number 30 out of 37, when you do the inflation-adjusted numbers. It's about $18 million behind the first Ant-Man and a bit more behind Captain America, the First Avenger, and Thor. Again, if it gets up to around $300 million, which I'm not even sure it's going to get that high, we're probably talking Ant-Man and the Wasp, Thor, the Dark World numbers. And when we're talking about Disney, I don't know if that was necessarily their hope or their expectation for the Fantastic Four. And this is the MCU franchise tracker worldwide, and I think that this shows the weakening of the MCU internationally, which I think is even more notable than the fact that it has less drawing power domestically. It's number 29 out of 37. It has passed Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings, and Captain America, Brave New World. It's the highest grossing MCU release so far this year, but that's not really saying much. If it could get to that $500 million range, then we'd be right around original Ant-Man numbers worldwide. But again, for the Fantastic Four, not exactly sure that's where Disney would have preferred that it ended up. And this is our first look at my estimated theatrical profitability for the Fantastic Four first steps. Again, this is theatrical grosses only. This does not count ancillaries. I just want to see how much money is coming back from the theatrical release. Again, we've covered this in detail. If you don't like how I do these numbers, that's fine. There's a lot of other people doing box office, but this is how I do it. It has a reported budget of around $200 million. I know that a lot of people think that it's higher, but that's the number that I saw consistently. A reported marketing budget around $125 million. That means the movie costs $325 million. Right now, it's made $435.3 million worldwide. You can see my math there on the left side. I estimate that the net return so far is $214.7 million. So that would mean that it has made, if the budget is $200 million, it has made its budget back theatrically, but it is still about $135.2 million, I estimate, from breaking even in the theatrical window. So in order to make up that shortfall, all of the money that came in via endorsements and product tie-ins and all of the Fantastic Four branded stuff, that then goes into the hole to fill in the shortfall theatrically, which is why I say that I think a lot of studios would prefer that their films either break even theatrically or come close to it, because they would love for that ancillary revenue to all be icing on top of the cake. They don't want to take that money and throw it into the pit to make up for what it hasn't made theatrically, and that's why I break down the numbers this way. Disney may not love what Fantastic Four has been doing, but Warner Brothers is reportedly happy about the performance of Superman, and it has now become, unadjusted for inflation, the highest grossing Superman movie of all time at $331.3 million. It has now passed Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. When you adjust for inflation, it is at number 5. It's past the theatrical gross of Superman Returns when you adjust that for inflation, and it's about $50 million behind the inflation-adjusted returns of Superman 2. So it doesn't look like it's going to get up to where Man of Steel would be adjusted for inflation, but it's not a massive drop-off either. I could see it getting to, 370, 380. We'll have to see how it legs out over the rest of this month. And this is how it was able to do it. Again, this is a bit of a new look chart. It's the same basic thing. It's a graph, but I wanted to upgrade my designs a little bit. This is how Superman was able to pass both Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. Again, this is not tracking profitability, it's tracking longevity. You can see that it opened about the same as Man of Steel. It opened well below where Batman v Superman did, but it has held so much better than either of those films, and it has been able to bypass their domestic grosses because people kept turning up. You didn't see that huge drop-off after weekend number 2, and it's still a pretty successful and popular film in theaters. That's why, again, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, weekend 1 is just part of the story. There's so much more to write. We're now a month into the release of Superman, and it is now past the 2 most notable Superman films from the DCEU. And as far as the highest grossing DC films of all time, again, this is not adjusted for inflation, Superman is now at number 7. It's ahead of Man of Steel, Suicide Squad, and Batman v Superman. And in a matter of days, probably today or tomorrow, it will pass both Aquaman and Joker to crack the top 5. I think it's got a great shot at passing the Batman to be number 4 on that list. But I don't know if it's going to get up to where Wonder Woman is, which is currently at $412.5 million. And again, just to show you the diverging paths of Superman and the Fantastic Four first steps, if you look at those first 3 days, they opened very close to each other, but Superman has had much more staying power, and I expect that these numbers are going to continue to diverge as I track these films over the next couple weeks. But it's not just Weapons, Superman, and Fantastic Four at the box office. F1 the movie, as we talked about looking at the top 10, is still hanging around, and there are some pretty substantial milestones for star Brad Pitt that have been passed in recent days. First of all, when you look at his top grossing films worldwide, F1 is now number one at $571.1 million. It passes his previous highest grossing film, World War Z, which is at $531.8 million. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Troy, and Ocean's 11 round out the top five, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Ocean's 12, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, 7, and Megamind making up numbers 6 through 10. When you look at Brad Pitt's highest grossing movies domestically, F1 the movie is currently at number 4, but it's got a good shot at hitting number 1. It's only about $24 million behind World War Z, which is Brad Pitt's highest grossing domestic film. And if it can continue to hold well domestically, and if it sees an increase when it hits premium theaters once again, I could see it doing it. I'm not exactly sure if it's got that much left, but I think that it is a distinct possibility. Adjusted for inflation, F1 is not yet in Brad Pitt's personal top 10. It's very close, though. I think it is going to surpass Ocean's 13 for number 10 on the list. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, 7, Ocean's 12, and Megamind are the rest of numbers 6 through 10. Brad Pitt's fifth highest grossing film adjusted for inflation is Interview with the Vampire at $228.4 million, with Troy at number 4, World War Z at number 3, Mr. and Mrs. Smith at number 2, and Ocean's 11 at number 1, with an adjusted gross of $359 million. Together is also still in the top 10, and it is now number 7 on Neon's all-time highest grossing list, and it's very close to passing Ferrari, and also I think is probably going to pass Anora to be number 5 on that list. So Together is going to be one of Neon's highest grossing films, although they also shelled out a lot of money to get the rights to distribute it in theaters. So we have Weapons at number 1, an R-rated film at the top of the box office charts for the summer, but it is rare to see an R-rated film be the overall number 1 movie for the summer. Weapons will not be. I think that Lilo and Stitch is going to be the number 1 movie. But that leads us to this week's Charts with Dan trivia question. I wanted to know, since 1975, only 5 R-rated films have been the top grossing film at the summer box office. What are they? So think back on the last 50 years of movies. 5 movies out of 50 that were rated R have been number 1. What are those 5 movies? Pause it if you need more time, because here come the answers. The answers are The Omen back in 1976, The Amityville Horror back in 1979, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Saving Private Ryan. So it's been about 27 years since an R-rated film was the number 1 movie of the summer. Last week, I asked members here on the channel what you believe will be the highest grossing movie domestically in August, and it was pretty close for the top spot. 35 people who responded said they believed that the Fantastic Four First Steps would carry over enough box office to still be the highest grossing movie in August, because it didn't have to be an August release. 33 people said that it would be Freakier Friday, and Weapons came in with less than half of the votes that Freakier Friday got. Just 14 people said Weapons. I think it is pretty safe to say at this point that Weapons is going to outgross Freakier Friday. And depending on how the Fantastic Four does and how well Weapons holds, I think it also has a really good shot at being the highest grossing film in August. 7 people said Nobody 2, and 5 people said The Bad Guys 2. And as I mentioned, Weapons continues a hot streak for Warner Brothers, and they've put out some pretty good films so far in 2025. So my question to the members here on the channel this week is, what is your favorite Warner Brothers release of the year so far? That poll is available now. You can go and leave your favorite, upvote your favorite if it's already there. The 5 picks with the most votes are going to be revealed next week. And just as a refresher, these are the Warner Brothers releases so far this year. So which of these movies is your favorite thus far? A Minecraft movie, Superman, Sinners, F1 the movie, Final Destination Bloodlines, Mickey 17, Weapons, Companion, and The Alto Knights. And I think that there are a few contenders. I'm actually curious to see what the number one movie is going to be. So be sure to come back next week to see the results of that poll. If you are not yet a member here on the channel and you want to be, depending on how you're watching it, there may be a button that you can push to become a member, or there's definitely a link down in the description below. Not only do you get to vote in the poll every week here on Charts with Dan, but you also get custom badges and emoji to use down in the chat, and you also get early access to videos like this. Not every video, but a lot of videos. So come be a part of the channel. I'd love to hear your voice, and we'll see what wins this poll next week. This is what the 2025 domestic summer box office looks like as we start getting into the middle of August. Lilo and Stitch is number one at $421.6 million. Superman moves up to number two, with Jurassic World Rebirth moving down to number three. How to Train Your Dragon is at number four. The Fantastic Four: First Steps is going to try to make a play for that number four spot. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is at number six, followed by Thunderbolts, F1 the movie, Final Destination: Bloodlines, and Elio, which is clinging on to number 10. I don't think it's going to be there for a whole lot longer. I think that Weapons is going to pass it up. And these are my predictions for the summer box office versus what the actual summer box office is. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pre-eliminate The Bad Guys 2. You can see that in red there. I picked it to be the 10th highest grossing movie of the summer. Given that Weapons grossed as much in one weekend as The Bad Guys 2 grossed in 2 weekends, I just don't see a path for The Bad Guys 2 to hit the top 10, so I am pre-eliminating it. Elio is going to be off that list soon because unless the bottom absolutely drops out of Weapons, and I don't see any indications that that is going to happen, then I think that I'm probably going to end up with 8 out of 10 as far as the movies themselves picked correctly, which is a respectable result. But I also think I'm probably only going to get 1 or maybe 2 of the final positions right. We'll see where it shakes out. I'm pretty confident that Lilo and Stitch is going to be number 1. I think that Fantastic Four has a good shot of being number 4, but we'll see where we go from there. And as always, at the end of the summer, I will do a full recap of the summer box office, which movies made a lot of money, which movies lost the most money, and how I did with my picks. This is the 2025 domestic box office so far this year. A Minecraft movie remains number 1. Lilo and Stitch, I think, might run out of gas just short of that number 1. I mean, it's only $2 million, but it's just not pulling in the numbers, so we'll see how that turns out. Superman is now the number 3 movie of the year, with Jurassic World Rebirth falling down to number 4. Sinners is still in the top 5. How to Train Your Dragon is at number 6. The Fantastic Four: First Steps moves up 1 spot to number 7. Captain America: Brave New World drops down 1 spot to number 8. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is at number 9. And Thunderbolts is at number 10. Its gross, by the way, is now final at $190.2 million. And this is the 2025 worldwide box office. No real change here, except that the Fantastic Four: First Steps is now the number 10 movie of the year at $435.3 million. It's going to try to get to that $500 million mark and pass Detective Chinatown 1900. Nudja 2 remains number 1. It will be having its U.S. release in just a matter of weeks. And Lilo and Stitch remains, and for right now, I think for the foreseeable future, the only Hollywood film that has crossed the $1 billion mark so far this year. So that's what's going on at the box office. Let's take a look now at the latest in the world of streaming. And for the second week in a row, Happy Gilmore 2 was the most watched movie on Netflix. This is for July 28th through August 3rd. There will be some new numbers released later today. In its second week, Happy Gilmore 2 brought in 40.84 million views. At number 2, though, was K-Pop Demon Hunters. The viewership was basically flat from the week before at 26.27 million views. I did a deep dive into the performance of K-Pop Demon Hunter earlier this week on the channel. If you want to check that video out right now, it was a lot of fun because you know me, I'm a big numbers nerd. In third place was the debut of the Netflix film My Oxford Year, which brought in 24.59 million views. Then the Netflix original series Untamed continued to do well at number 4 with 12.25 million views. And Happy Gilmore rounded out the top 5, the original film, at 11.35 million views. And then we had a slew of new entries that make up number 6 through 10. First of all, we have Gladiator 2 at 8.52 million views, followed by Trainwreck Storm Area 51 at number 7, Hotel Transylvania 3 at number 8, Flight Plan at number 9, and The Hunting Wives Season 1, a Netflix original series, at number 10, with 5.76 million views. These are the best performances for movies this year on Netflix, and Happy Gilmore 2 had the 5th best weekly performance for a movie in 2025 at 40.84 million views. It's about a 6 million view drop from its opening weekend, but you can see that it could not compare to the matching week 1 and week 2 performance of Back in Action at 46.79 million views. And of course, the top performance for a movie thus far this year, which was the second week of Straw, which brought in 48.89 million views. According to my viewership numbers, this is a combination of both the Netflix What We Watched report covering the first 6 months of the year, as well as the ratings data we've gotten since then. I estimate that Happy Gilmore 2 is the 6th most watched movie of the year on Netflix at 87.59 million views. That bumps down Havoc, The Secret Life of Pets 2, The Electric State, and Counterattack. But look at that number 2 slot. Unless K-Pop Demon Hunters falls off the chart completely, and I don't see any indication that that's going to happen, it should pass Back in Action to become the most watched movie on Netflix this year when the new data comes out later today. And that would also make it the most watched program of the year on Netflix. As far as the most watched shows of the year, Untamed enters the chart at 62.93 million views, with Miss Rachel Season 1 staying at number 5 and everything else basically taking a step down. Adolescence remains the most watched series of the year, but the Squid Games are both kind of sniffing around. So we'll see if they can take that at least temporarily until we get final viewership data at the end of the year. Let's take a look now at the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, this covers the week of July 7th through the 13th because it takes about a month for Nielsen to get these numbers to us, and these are U.S. numbers only. This is not global like the Netflix numbers that we just looked at. These were the most watched streaming movies for the week of July 7th through the 13th, and at number 1 was Medea's Destination Wedding at 19.9 million hours watched. Close behind was K-Pop Demon Hunters at 13.6 million hours, followed by the Amazon original film Heads of State, Sinners, which was in its second week on Max, The Old Guard 2, which was in its second week on Netflix, and a Minecraft movie at number 6. Then we had the debut of Zombies 4 on Disney Plus at 4.5 million hours watched, coming in at number 7. The Netflix original film Brick at number 8. Penguins of Madagascar at number 9. And Almost Cops on Netflix, rounding out the top 10. And when we look at the best debuts for a streaming film, according to Nielsen data so far this year, Medea's Destination Wedding actually comes in at number 4, ahead of the debut of The Electric State on Netflix, which I don't think they had planned. I don't think they anticipated a Medea film to outdraw, at least according to Nielsen, The Electric State in the United States for its debut. The Accountant 2 is at number 3, Back in Action is at number 2, and of course at number 1 we have the debut of Moana 2 on Disney Plus back in March. These were the most watched streaming shows for July 7th through the 13th. At number 1 was Love Island USA. According to some of the articles that I was reading, this is the first time that Peacock has had an overall number 1 most watched streaming show at 32.2 million hours watched. Sullivan's Crossing is at number 2 on Netflix. This is not a Netflix original series. This is an older series, but they've been having a lot of success with that this summer. It comes in at 22.4 million hours watched. Squid Games at number 3. Blind Spot and Animal Kingdom, 2 other older series that are doing well on Netflix, come in at numbers 4 and 5. The Amazon original series Ballard comes in at number 6, followed by Bluey and Criminal Minds. And then we have the return of 2 regulars on this chart, Grey's Anatomy at number 9 and Bob's Burgers at number 10. And when you look at the top streaming shows as far as watch time per available episode, so this is hours watched divided by number of episodes that you can watch, the Amazon series Ballard is at number 1 at 1.71 million hours watched per episode, followed by Countdown at 1.15 million hours per episode. The Netflix series The Waterfront comes in at number 3. Sullivan's Crossing comes in close behind at number 4. Squid Game is at number 5. The Sandman's at number 6, but not at the same numbers that we see from a lot of the other Netflix series on this chart. Quarterback is at number 7, followed by Ginny and Georgia at number 8, The Bear at number 9, and Poker Face at number 10. And that does it for Charts with Dan this week. Before I go, though, I wanted to give you a heads up about some things that you might be interested in, both at home and in theaters this upcoming week. First of all, later today, I'm really looking forward to this. We have the debut of Alien Earth on FX. You can catch the first 2 episodes. I've heard some good things about the show. And I may talk about it here on the channel if I find enough worth talking about. Also available for digital sale and premium video on demand. Those are those higher priced 48-hour rentals. We have 2 recent releases. One of them is Eddington, which you can now watch at home, and Smurfs is also available to watch at home today. Tomorrow on Amazon Prime Video, you can catch the full 6-episode run of a new original series called Butterfly, starring Daniel Day Kim as a former U.S. spy living in South Korea. Honestly, Amazon just sees across all these spy shows over at this point. Just have them all mix and match. Why not? Tomorrow, you can also see for one day only in theaters a new version of Red Sonja, which will be followed by a release on premium video on demand later this month. So if you were itching for a new Red Sonja film, well, tomorrow's your chance, and you're not going to get another one. On Thursday, Shin Godzilla comes out in a 4K re-release. I did a ranking of all the Godzilla films about a year and a half ago, I think, maybe a little bit more or less. At times kind of weird for me right now. And this is one of the best, in my opinion, Godzilla films ever made. So if you haven't seen the movie, or if you want to see it on the big screen, you can catch it on Thursday. Also on Thursday is the series finale of the HBO Max Sex and the City follow-up. And just like that, it was only recently announced that this would be the series finale. So that'll be the end of the show. I've never seen an episode of either show, but if you like it, go catch it on Thursday. Then on Friday, the big release as far as the studios go is Nobody 2, which will be hitting theaters everywhere. I'm curious to see how it does. It was a pretty good sort of coming out of the pandemic era hit, but I don't know how many people are going to show up to see it in a theater. Also opening in some theaters on Friday ahead of a streaming release in September is Highest to Lowest, which is Spike Lee's latest film starring Denzel Washington. It's actually his take on a previous Akira Kurosawa film. I'm hoping to catch that at my earliest opportunity. In limited release is a movie that I watched out of the Sundance Film Festival and enjoyed. It's called East of Wall. I was doing some reading, and apparently this was one of the AMC mystery movies, and people were not happy because it's definitely not one that you want to go into cold. But if you like this specific kind of movie, then I think that you're going to enjoy it. You can also catch in some theaters around the country Americana, starring Sydney Sweeney and Paul Walter Hauser. That's been getting a lot of publicity for weird reasons lately, or at least Sydney Sweeney has, but she does have a new movie hitting theaters. And in some theaters, you can catch Dead to Rights, which we've been talking about for the last couple weeks on the show. It was playing exclusively in China, but it is now hitting the domestic marketplace this upcoming weekend. And finally, on Friday, a movie that I actually heard about, but came and went from theaters so quickly, The Legend of Ochi will be hitting HBO Max. I probably will try to catch that because I've heard that it's a pretty strong film. Then finally on Sunday, in the weekly movie that makes me feel absolutely ancient, Fathom will be re-releasing the 1990 version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the live-action film, back into theaters for its 35th anniversary. I remember wanting to see that movie when I was a child. Well, maybe I can go see it again and feel old. If you don't catch it on Sunday night, you can also catch it next Wednesday. And that's all I've got for you this week. Be sure to stay tuned, though. The summer movie season may be cooling down, but there's always really fun stuff going on in the world of movies and streaming. Who knows? Maybe another War of the Worlds is going to hit. I mean, it'd be great for the channel, but terrible for humanity. You just never know what's going to happen from week to week. But most importantly, thank you for watching this video. If you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell so you know when I post something new. And until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.